Welcome back. This episode dives into reversing type 2 diabetes and why calories isn't the whole story.
Then we go full chaos. Insulin, leptin resistance, fat depots, obesogens, fiber, and even free will.
I'm sorry, but the title alone, calorie counting is BS, that's brave, not accurate.
Brave, yes, but also he's basically saying counting calories is addressing the symptom.
Okay, but insulin does matter, right? Refined carbs spike insulin, and diabetes is when the pancreas can't keep up.
Sure, but do it perfectly is different from calorie counting doesn't work at all.
Also, he's flexing ketogenic diets like the only proven remote control.
And intermittent fasting as the liver rest button. That image is too clean.
The leptin thermostat analogy was actually interesting, though. Floor but no ceiling.
I like the metaphor, but people will hear it and think science is just vibes plus metaphors.
Wait, leptin injections? He says they won't work in leptin resistance because you already have too much leptin.
Right, like throwing water on a fire that's already hot because the hose is blocked.
But then he pivots to genetics being rare and calls most obesity an environmental problem.
I buy mostly environmental, but I hate the implication that biology is basically optional.
The fat depot breakdown, subcutaneous, visceral, liver fat, felt like the real punchline.
Skinny fat as liver fat, and you can't measure it on a bathroom scale.
I love how he says subcutaneous is protective, like the body's packing peanuts.
But the numbers, 10 kilos, 2 kilos, half a pound, sounds precise while we're hand-waving measurement.
Visceral fat linked to cortisol from stress and depression. He's tying mood to fat distribution.
This is the kind of claim that makes me want to ask, where's the counterfactual?
Still, it tracks that stress can drive eating and metabolic dysfunction through multiple pathways.
Then he drops obesogens, chemicals that cause fat cell growth even without calories.
PFAAs, BPA phthalates, endocrine disruptors like our bodies are getting spoofed by the environment.
Endocrine disruptors is such a polite phrase for your cell receptors are being pranked.
The receptor idea is the core. Chemicals mimic signals and tissues develop wrongly.
And he connects that to fertility issues and even alligator populations disappearing. Big claims, big visuals.
I'm not saying it's wrong, but using alligator doom as proof is marketing adjacent.
It's like if it happened to lizards, it must be real. Science can be fun, but needs receipts.
Okay, but the fiber segment? That was clean and practical. Apple juice versus whole apple because fiber feeds gut bacteria.
And he makes it microbiome-centric. Diversity, gut barrier, SCFAs like butyrate, immune modulation.
I liked the freezer homework assignment. Freeze the apple, thaw it, watch mush happen like a science experiment.
The apple basically becomes a case study in why the food industry calls it a commodity.
But his processed nutrients versus poison language is where I get defensive.
Yeah, because ultra-processed food inhibits growth sounds like a sweeping statement that depends on study design.
I'm fine with the general direction, limit ultra-processed stuff, but blanket declarations make people stop thinking.
He tries to give you a filter called perfect, which is basically stop shopping, upload your preferences.
Sounds like a product pitch hiding inside nutrition philosophy.
Still, the protect liver, feed gut, support brain framework is a decent rubric for evaluating foods.
And the societal responsibility part was spicy. He's against blaming individuals because it never solved HIV or tobacco.
He argues you need regulation because addictive and toxic products get special handling anyway.
And then the UK sodium reduction story. Secret meetings, lowering sodium, stroke, and hypertension dropping.
Don't tell the public is such a grim tactic, but the results argument is real.
The part where he discusses free will is where I wanted to throw my hands up.
He really went full philosophy. You can choose the candy, but you can't choose the biochemical craving.
That's partially true, but no free will is a trap too. It kills agency and problem solving.
Exactly. Otherwise, the conclusion becomes society fix everything and personal behavior becomes irrelevant.
He tries to bridge it with 4 Cs: connect, contribute, cope, cook, like behavioral levers around cortisol and dopamine.
And it was actually coherent. Sleep, mindfulness, exercise to tamp down cortisol, social connection for serotonin.
I also liked the misinformation versus veracity vibe. Science isn't a straight line, it zigzags.
Zigzag science is comforting until you realize every old certainty becomes a future punchline.
True, but the meta point matters. Don't worship claims, test them continuously.
The final wild card was amygdala fear center under attack, causing chronic disease, mental health, climate, war, everything.
That's the one I'll push back hardest. Tying schizophrenia and climate change to the amygdala feels overfitted.
Agreed. But as a unifying metaphor for stress physiology driving downstream issues, it's not crazy.
So we end with root cause is stress plus dysregulated signals from food, environment, and sleep.
And the actionable part is surprisingly not that mystical. Whole foods, fiber, less ultra-processed, manage stress, sleep better.
Which is basically what smart people have been telling you, just with far louder biochemical justification.
Loud biochemistry as a gateway drug to boring fundamentals. I'll take it.
We've covered the insulin-leptin story, the fat depot map, and why fiber and obesogens might matter.
Next up is our closing loop. Thanks for riding this whole 2-episode ride with us.
If you learned one thing, let it be this. Focus on systems, not just calories.
And if you only do one thing this week, eat more fiber and sleep like it's a nutrient.
That's it from us. Series done, conversation not. See you in the next one. Welcome back. Last one, but we're still not done thinking out loud.
This episode dug into why insulin and leptin resistance might be reversible, plus the wild obesogens plus fiber angle.
Also, we reviewed how medical school irreversible narratives can get spicy.
The insulin part, glucose, refined carbs spike insulin, insulin resistance, diabetes, clear chain.
Clear, but I kept side-eyeing the certainty of absolutely no doubt.
Fair. But the core claim is that type 2 isn't a life sentence if you reverse drivers.
The funniest thing is he called the old framing garbage, and honestly, same energy.
I like the distinction. Diabetes is basically pancreas can't keep up, not immortal curse.
But then he slides into calorie counting is BS, and my brain goes, hold up.
Yeah, because energy balance isn't optional. Thermodynamics doesn't care about vibes.
Exactly. You can tell a compelling story, but you still have to explain why bodies lose or gain mass.
I think the argument was more like strict calorie tracking rarely works long-term, and hormones matter.
And the leptin thermostat metaphor, floor no ceiling, was actually sticky in my head.
Leptin says you've got enough energy, so your brain stops pushing hunger and conserved energy behaviors.
But with leptin resistance, your brain thinks you're starving while you're sitting on the couch.
That's the biochemistry of I'll start tomorrow, except now it has citations.
Still, I hate when resistance becomes a universal explanation for everything.
Same. But the key practical point sounded right. Insulin and liver fat first, then hunger behavior gets easier.
The fat depot breakdown was wild. Subcutaneous protective-ish, visceral tied to stress cortisol, liver fat tiny but dangerous.
And skinny fat became less cosmetic and more metabolic geography.
I mean the 2 kilograms of visceral fat being enough to flip the metabolic switch. Chef's kiss for drama.
And the examples. Depression patients losing subcutaneous but gaining visceral because cortisol reallocates energy fast.
I want to believe the mechanism, but we still have to separate correlation from causation in those observations.
Then comes the part that felt the most controversial. Obesogens, chemicals driving fat cell growth independent of calories.
Oh man, the list. PFAS, BPA, phthalates, parabens, flame retardants, like a horror anthology for endocrine receptors.
It's convincing as a concept, Endocrine disruption is real, but the leap from everywhere to this is why obesity needs careful weight.
Like, yes, chemicals exist, but also food environment exists, and both can be bad guys.
He basically gave you a you can't escape the floor vibe, which is emotionally relatable, but scientifically exhausting.
The toy's shapes analogy for receptors was clever, though. Environment pretending to be the right signals.
Endocrine disruptors, shifting differentiation and growth of fat cells could explain effects that don't track neatly with calories.
But I kept wanting one more step. What's the effect size versus diet, sleep, and activity for the average person?
Same. Still, he landed on a practical-ish answer. You can't fix all exposure, but you can reduce processed junk and improve fiber.
That's why fiber was the closer, because it's not defeatist. Fiber is actionable at home today.
Fiber is essential for your bacteria, not you, and that it supports gut barriers, mucin layer, tight junctions, made sense.
Also, I loved the pregnancy for 100 trillion metaphor. Eating for two is cute, but it's really eating for an entire ecosystem.
And short-chain fatty acids, acetate, propionate, butyrate, especially the butyrate-ish immune modulation angle.
The fiber deficiency makes immune systems worse for COVID claim was bold, possible, but don't oversell it as destiny.
Sure, but the core takeaway is still fewer refined carbs, more fiber, better metabolic health.
The apple juice bit was almost too entertaining. You lose fiber, you feed bacteria less, they lose diversity.
And the freezer homework, thaw mush, because ice crystals rupture cell walls, food industry alchemy explained.
Turning food into a commodity that can survive shipping. Congrats, you invented a nutritionally diluted product.
He also argued ultra-processed food may inhibit growth and burning, so food becomes a functional definition.
That definition might be provocative, but I get it. Nutrients aren't the same as what triggers growth and energy metabolism.
Then there was this futuristic perfect filtering service, your personal grocery that hides the toxic stuff.
I'll take it, because staring at labels is my villain origin story.
And the regulatory parallel, UK sodium reduction, was the bridge from personal responsibility to systems responsibility.
The sodium example was actually smart. Remove competitive disadvantage, change industry behavior, measurable public health outcomes.
For sugar, the idea is similar. Common targets, lower additives, consistent standards, because information asymmetry is brutal.
But the big philosophical curveball was free will and personal responsibility.
Yeah, he basically said obesity behaviors are secondary to biochemistry, so blaming individuals fails like past public health campaigns.
I respect the argument, but I still want some we can do small actions without collapsing into determinism.
Like, even if drive is strong, discipline differs. He tried to say some people can resist sugar addiction better.
And then the percentages. Tea tolerers, social drinkers, binge drinkers. His numbers sounded like he pulled them from a spreadsheet in his head.
Which is perfect for a podcast, but not perfect for a grant proposal.
Still, his society needs remediation when toxic plus addictive framing is solid. Alcohol and tobacco didn't get solved by vibes.
Exactly. Toxicity plus addiction changes the rules. You can't treat it like a moral failing only.
And then he linked everything. Chronic disease, mental health, autism possibility, war, climate, back to the amygdala under attack.
That everything is amygdala move felt like a grand unifying theory. Cool, but sometimes you can overfit the story.
Overfitted neuroscience is still neuroscience fanfiction, unfortunately.
But the practical 4 C's for contentment, connect, contribute, cope, cook, was actually grounded and helpful.
Connect face-to-face, contribute with purpose, cope via sleep, mindfulness, exercise, cook with tryptophan and omega-3s. Yeah, that's usable.
And lowering cortisol and improving serotonin as a bridge back to metabolic health still feels consistent with the stress-fat depot idea.
So where do I land, honestly? I think the emphasis on insulin, leptin, and fiber is strong, even if some claims are too absolute.
I land similarly. The details might evolve, but the direction, whole foods, fiber, better sleep, stress management, survives updates.
Loud biochemistry as a gateway drug to boring fundamentals. We already said it, and I'm saying it again.
And it's a nice ending because you can start today without a subscription or a debate team.
All right, this series is wrapping, but the takeaway stays. Systems win, not just calorie spreadsheets.
If you only do one thing, eat more fiber and sleep like it's a nutrient.
That's it from us. Thanks for sticking with this 2-episode ride.
See you in the next one, and until then, keep questioning the story and feed your microbiome like you mean it.
Welcome back. This final episode ties insulin, leptin, obesogens, and fiber together into one messy system.
We're debating what's solid, what's overly certain, and what you can actually do today.
The big swing was diabetes reversal, not chronic progressive forever.
I'm with the optimism, but I also hate when people weaponize certainty.
Doctors learned in medical school is wrong is such a reckless headline.
Yeah, that line is like a motivational poster for overconfident podcasts.
But there's something underneath it. Insulin resistance and liver fat respond to diet changes.
Exactly. If you reduce refined carbs and support weight loss, you can improve glycemic control.
The transcript kept saying the pancreas can't keep up, but then everything becomes reversible.
I want to separate reversible for a while from reversible for everyone.
Some people need medication long-term, even if lifestyle dramatically helps.
And that's the nuance that prevents people from turning diabetes care into a vibes-only project.
Now let's talk leptin, because the thermostat analogy is honestly pretty fire.
The thermostat part is the claim. Low leptin signals starvation, high leptin signals resistance.
But the leptin resistance takes 5 years thing, like, that's such a clean number for biology.
Biology rarely gives you tidy timelines, though the broader point, energy signals drive behavior, is real.
I like the servo control explanation because it explains why just eat less fails emotionally.
The psychology of hunger isn't only willpower, it's biochemistry shouting from a control tower.
That's why the anti-calorie count rant felt half right and half performative.
Calorie counting is BS is such a dumb, absolutist sticker to slap on everything.
But also, if your calories come from ultra-processed stuff, appetite and metabolism can derail you.
So the real debate becomes, calories are not the only variable, but energy balance still matters.
Then Obesogens enters, and everyone's eyes either widen or roll back.
I actually like the definition. Weight gain, not through calories, but through fat cell differentiation and storage biology.
My issue is scaling, from chemicals can affect pathways to this is why obesity is everywhere.
Agreed. Environmental endocrine disruptors might contribute, but the size of the effect is hard to pin down.
Teflon, boat bottoms, pacifiers, receipts. It's like a chemical bingo card.
And every cell in my body wants to ask, okay, what's the dose, timing, and real-world exposure level?
Still, the concept that timing matters, early life critical periods, feels plausible.
Especially if we're talking about developmental signaling and receptor programming.
The transcript also dragged in the fat depots story like subcutaneous is protective, visceral is stress, liver is tiny.
The 2 kilos of visceral fat threshold sounded oddly precise again.
But the idea that fat distribution maps to metabolic risk is absolutely not new or crazy.
And skinny fat is a useful warning. Scale weight can lie to you.
The DDT metabolite predicting obesity decades later, linking environment to offspring risk, wakes people up.
Even if every causal link isn't airtight, the precautionary lesson is reasonable. Reduce unnecessary exposure.
But then there was that big industry claim. Processed food is basically poison because it doesn't contribute to growth or burning.
I push back on poison. Food can be helpful or harmful depending on patterns, portion sizes, and the person.
Calling everything poison is great for outrage, terrible for actionable guidance.
The stronger part was the ultra-processed food framing. Not just macros, but how it drives behavior, satiety, and gut ecology.
Also, the apple juice versus apple part is such a clean gut-level metaphor.
Fiber as microbiome fuel. Finally, a mechanism normal people can actually visualize.
The claim that humans can't digest fiber, bacteria do, that part is unsexy and correct.
And when you remove fiber, you don't just remove roughage, you change the ecosystem.
That's why Feed Your Gut is more than wellness cosplay.
Short-chain fatty acids, barrier integrity, inflammation modulation, those are plausible downstream benefits.
Still, I don't love the way the transcript implied fiber alone fixes metabolic syndrome.
Fiber helps, but you are still dealing with sleep, stress, activity, and overall diet quality.
Which circles back to our earlier point. Don't outsource responsibility to one single hormone story.
And don't outsource it to one single app that tells you what to buy.
The perfect filters idea was kind of fun, though, like metabolic Tinder for groceries.
Sure, but the basics still win. More whole foods, more fiber, less ultra-processed sludge.
And don't forget stress and sleep, because the amygdala or cortisol framing hit that same theme.
When cortisol rises, appetite and fat distribution can shift, and behavior gets harder.
The 4 breaks on the amygdala stuff was poetic, even if I'm not clinically verifying every step.
But I'll take the spirit. Mental health, chronic disease, and behavior are entangled systems.
Which means the solution isn't count calories harder, it's rebuild your inputs.
And if you only do one thing after this episode, you should be able to name it without a calculator: fiber and sleep.
Fiber is the least glamorous superpower in modern nutrition.
And sleep is the most underrated supplement, legally speaking.
Also, I'm glad we ended this series by admitting the absolute claims might be overstretched.
The evidence evolves. What doesn't evolve is that systems beat spreadsheets.
If you're waiting for perfect scientific consensus before eating an apple with fiber, good luck.
Same with movement, stress reduction, and smarter food patterns. Start small, stay consistent.
All right, I'm officially done with the hormone lecture. Time to eat like a person.
That's the flex. Boring fundamentals, done daily, with enough humility for updates.
This series is wrapping, but the takeaway stays. Systems win, not just calorie spreadsheets.
If you only do one thing, eat more fiber and sleep like it's a nutrient.
That's it from us. Thanks for sticking with this 2-episode ride.
See you in the next one, and until then, keep questioning the story and feed your microbiome like you mean it.
Welcome back, last lap of the series. This one gets biochemical fast.
We basically tore apart calories only and talked insulin, leptin, obesogens, and why fiber matters.
The wild claim is diabetes reversibility, like, doctors told you it's progressive.
I like the reversal narrative, but I'm always careful about how universally it's framed.
Yeah, but the mechanism they push is liver first. Reduce refined carbs, insulin down, pancreas recovers.
They go further and say leptin resistance is the flaw with no ceiling driving behavior.
Thermostat with no air conditioning is honestly such a good image.
It makes the couch sitting feel less like laziness and more like circuitry misreading energy.
But the leap from hormones to behavior always feels slightly too cinematic to me.
Sure, but even if it's not the whole story, it's still a critique of blaming individuals only.
Like personal responsibility as a cure for an ecosystem of cues and chemicals.
Speaking of chemicals, obesogens, Teflon, BPA, phthalates, this is where my brain started spinning.
Same, because it's not calories, it's fat cell differentiation as the pathway.
Endocrine disruptors mimicking signals, so receptors get tricked during development, maybe even before birth.
And they tie it to fertility decline, neurocognition, even autism as a potential link, clearly not proven though.
I'll grant plausibility, but everywhere exposure stories can become untestable vibes.
Unescapable is doing a lot of work there, but yeah, regulation matters.
I actually liked the UK sodium example, public health intervention with measurable outcomes.
That's the argument. If sodium reduction worked quietly, sugar reduction could too, without pretending it's just willpower.
Also, if the industry can reformulate, the "it's all consumer choice" excuse collapses.
Exactly. Consumers didn't design the formulation in the first place.
But then comes the perfect app idea. Filter your grocery store by your metabolic profile.
I'm skeptical because labeling claims aren't the same as outcome data for you specifically.
True, but even a crude filter that removes refined carbs and ultra-processed stuff might help most people.
And the three-organ rubric, protect liver, feed gut, support brain, turns diet into a system checklist.
Liver fat, visceral fat, subcutaneous fat. The depot breakdown was my favorite part.
Visceral fat as the metabolic worst actor is the least cute kind of belly.
The cortisol story for visceral fat under stress/depression, while dramatic, still maps to known stress biology.
I buy the cortisol connection directionally, but the exact ratios like 2 kilos sound like rhetorical precision.
Even if the numbers are fuzzy, the skinny fat concept, liver fat causing dysfunction, lands hard.
Yeah, because you can look fine and still be metabolically wrecked.
Then fiber dropped in like the hero weapon. Bacteria need it, not us directly.
And they framed fiber as essential for microbiome diversity and gut barrier integrity.
The idea that juice is nutrients without fiber is such a weight that changes everything moment.
Frozen concentrated juice is basically a shelf life hack that removes what the bacteria were eating.
I do want to separate fiber feeds gut from any overreach about every single health outcome being fiber dependent.
But the homework, freezing an apple and watching it turn mush, was a perfect visceral demonstration.
It highlights cell wall structure and water dynamics, food processing turning food into commodity form.
And that loops back into the bigger philosophical point. Processed nutrients aren't the same as food behaviorally.
Which is also why calorie counting alone often fails. People can restrict and still not repair signaling and metabolism.
I'll push back slightly. Calorie deficit still matters for weight loss, even if hormones explain regain.
Agreed, math still matters, but the math explains everything story is too simplistic.
The tone of the episode was basically, spreadsheets are necessary, but they're not sufficient biology.
And the personal responsibility discussion, free will, amygdala, cortisol, got spicy.
Yeah, because they argued that if your drive mechanisms are biased, discipline is not evenly distributed.
That's the core. Blaming individuals never solved tobacco or HIV, so why expect it to solve obesity at population scale?
Also, if 40% don't touch tea and 20% can drink without issues, the everyone is the same narrative is clearly wrong.
They even bring up food addiction conference stuff. Always controversial, but it's an angle.
I just hate when addiction becomes a label that avoids mechanisms and measurement.
Fair, but even as a metaphor, it supports the claim. Toxic plus addictive usually gets societal response.
And that 4Cs framework, connect, contribute, cope, cook, was actually practical, not just theoretical.
Connect face-to-face, contribute with purpose, cope with sleep and mindfulness, cook with tryptophan and omega-3s.
It's almost like they're saying, fix brain stress, and the food choices become less of a hostage negotiation.
Which is why the amygdala, as the driver, is such a unifying story across metabolic and mental health.
Do I think one brain center explains everything in the world? No, but it's a useful organizing hypothesis.
And the outro question, what you'd tell your 20-year-old self, was basically, stop pleasing everyone, which is peak human.
That's the most metabolic statement possible. Boundaries reduce cortisol.
Okay, series wrap time. Thanks for riding with us through insulin, leptin, obesogens, and fiber.
If you remember one thing, the system wins, not one magic calorie trick.
Welcome back. This episode closes the loop. Insulin, leptin, obesogens, and fiber.
Yeah, we basically went from bloodstream insulin to belly fat to the bacteria buffet.
And the big claim is, diabetes and metabolic disease can be reversible.
Reversible, yes. But doctors learn in medical school is wrong is bold, bro.
I mean, wrong is strong, but he's pointing at outdated, progressive forever framing.
Exactly. What pissed me off is the certainty, not the direction.
He made calorie counting sound like a villain by association.
Calorie counting is BS is such a YouTube title energy statement.
But even in his own story, energy still flows. Blood energy into fat cells for storage.
Right, so the calories aren't imaginary. The mechanism story is what's contested.
The mechanism he leans on is insulin lowering by reducing refined carbohydrates and sugar spikes.
My pushback is insulin isn't the only lever people pull for appetite and adherence.
True, but his pancreas must make insulin properly. Logic connects liver insulin resistance too.
Give the liver a rest is the kind of sentence that makes people nod too fast.
Still, the liver fat angle is intuitive. Small fat amount, big metabolic dysfunction.
And he calls it skinny fat, because you can't see liver fat on a scale.
Then, he pivots to leptin as the thermostat. When leptin drops, the brain interprets starvation.
Leptin is made in fat cells, but it's not just low leptin equals weight gain, it's leptin resistance too.
I loved the thermostat analogy because it implies you can't willpower your way past a broken sensor.
But leptin resistance timelines taking years could be true and still not help someone today.
He basically argues the body fights long-term restriction, so you need sustainable metabolic rewiring.
And then, boom, environmental obesogens, chemicals that drive fat cell differentiation independent of calories.
That's where he goes full, unescapable endocrine disruptors everywhere.
Unescapable is emotionally effective, but practically it makes me want to throw up my hands.
But he does offer practical tries. Reduce exposure pathways like canned food, BPA, certain plastics, air pollution where possible.
He turned my kitchen into a science lab. Freezer apple, avoid juice beverages, check the can liner, wash apples.
Science lab kitchen is fun until you realize it's mostly about avoiding modern processing shortcuts.
The obesogen list is long. PFOA, TBT, BPA, phthalates, parabens. So I wonder how much effect size matters individually.
Yeah, endocrine disruptors plausibility is high, but relative contribution versus overeating and sleep disruption is always the tricky part.
And he groups ultra-processed food as essentially not food because it fails growth and burning stimulation.
Food can be medicine, food can be poison, is older than all of this, but he made it feel modern.
Yet calling ultra-processed food inhibits growth based on height changes feels interpretive.
Sure, but it's consistent with his fructose mitochondria angle. Calories may exist, but function can be altered.
I actually like the functional definition he's pushing. Food contributes to growth or burning, poison doesn't.
That ties neatly into fiber, because fiber is food for bacteria, not enzymes you personally have.
And he goes hard. Fiber supports microbiome diversity, tight junction barriers, and short-chain fatty acids.
He even links SCFAs to immune suppression, explaining why obesity correlates with worse outcomes.
The apple becomes mush in the freezer demo was wild, like a biology magic trick.
He made food processing sound like it's laundering fruit into commodity product.
Storable cells on commodities exchange won't go rancid, therefore sell the planet poison, basically.
Then the responsibility debate. He refuses the easy, victim-blaming take.
He says personal responsibility requires free will, and then argues free will might be minimal.
And I'm sitting there like, okay, philosopher, but also tell me what to do tomorrow.
The equilibrium he wants is multi-level: public health, regulation, industry reform, and individual behavior.
That's why the UK sodium reduction story hit government-aligned manufacturers without competitive disadvantage.
Secret meetings is spicy, but the mechanism, standardized targets, makes sense.
Still, sodium reduction is one variable. Sugar is a whole ecosystem of ingredients and incentives.
Right. And regulation faces the everything is different for different bodies problem he mentioned too.
Plus, politics loves loopholes more than it loves metabolic health.
That's why his metabolic matrix idea, protect the liver, feed the gut, support the brain, feels like a practical rubric.
It's like a meta-definition. Any food that hits all three is healthy, misses any is poison.
I agree with the direction, but I'd love the nuance. Poison is a strong word for gradients and context.
True, but he wants behavioral clarity because grocery stores are basically minefields.
And he hints at software filtering. Perfect. Like personalized ordering without reading labels.
That's the entrepreneurial version of metabolic health rubric. The cynic in me wonders about bias and transparency.
The cynic in me wonders if for you becomes for the app.
But even if imperfect, it pushes people toward fiber-forward, sugar spike-limiting choices.
And it ties back to the brain. Cortisol, sleep deprivation, stress environment, and even social disconnection.
The 4 C's, connect, contribute, cope, cook, was the cleanest self-help bridge in the whole transcript.
Cook with tryptophan and omega-3s is basically eat like your mood depends on it, because it does.
Then the big unifier claim. Dysfunctional amygdala driving chronic disease, mental health crisis, global crisis.
I like unifying stories, but amygdala as root cause might be too single point for my taste.
Yeah, one brain center to rule them all is always suspicious, even if it's useful.
Still, the practical takeaway is consistent. Reduce stress physiology load while changing food and fiber patterns.
And in the end, that outro question, what you'd tell your 20-year-old self, was boundaries reduce cortisol.
Peak metabolic wisdom. Stop pleasing everyone, then your body can breathe.
Okay, wrap time. If you remember one thing from this final episode, let it be. No magic trick beats the system.
The system wins. Insulin and leptin sensors, Obesogens context, and fiber feeding the microbiome.
Thanks for riding with us through the glucose expert debate.
We'll see you next series. Take care of your brain, your gut, and your standards.
Welcome back, final episode, and we're still arguing with our food science receipts.
This one ties insulin and leptin control to obesity, then drags in obesogens and fiber.
I love the ambition, but calorie counting is BS is a spicy opener.
It's not just spicy, it's throwing a chair and calling it a load of BS.
The claim is refined carbs drive the first insulin spike and insulin resistance reversal.
Right, and they frame diabetes as pancreas stress plus liver fat dynamics, reversible for a while.
Meanwhile, I'm sitting here like, cool, but where's the thermostat in my brain?
The thermostat is leptin, floor, no ceiling, and your brain thinks it's starvation even when fat exists.
Leptin injections don't work because the receptors are downregulated or blocked. Too much leptin, not missing leptin.
But that's still a model. Biology loves models until reality shows up with messy exceptions.
The episode also goes hard on fat depots. Subcutaneous, protective, visceral, stress-driven, liver tiny but deadly.
And visceral fat being only a couple kilos before metabolic illness is wild but plausible.
Be thin, be sick is the whole skinny fat vibe, and liver fat is the villain with a small footprint.
Then comes obesogens, chemicals that grow or differentiate fat cells without being calories.
I'm open, but everything causes fat can turn into vibes unless the evidence is crisp.
They list PFAS, BPA, phthalates, parabens, TBT, endocrine disruptors acting like hormone mimics.
The toys that fit shapes analogy was actually clean. Environment pretending to be signals.
And it's not just obesity. Fertility, neurocognition, even autism is floated but carefully caveated.
I appreciate the caveat, but I still hate when listeners mentally connect dots they weren't shown.
Fair, but the practical punchline is less refined sugar, better food structure, and fiber.
Fiber isn't the garnish. It's the fuel for your microbiome, feeding bacterial diversity and gut barriers.
And juicing or blending removes fiber, so you starve the bacteria even if vitamins survive.
The freeze an apple and it turns mush homework was kind of genius.
Yeah, and it ties to processing, making fruit shelf-stable as a commodity, not as food.
That food can be poison framework is useful, but I want a boundary. Not every processed thing is lethal.
Sure, but the argument is about contribution to growth and burning. Ultra-processed can inhibit both.
Also, they mention ultra-processed lowering growth outcomes, like height deficits in population studies.
At minimum, it's a reason to stop treating calories like the only metric that matters.
The perfect filter app idea, ordering metabolically healthier food by personal filters, sounds inevitable.
Just promise me it doesn't replace thinking. It should reduce label anxiety, not thoughtlessness.
Then we get to the ethics. Personal responsibility versus free will versus public health intervention.
The Arthur Schopenhauer line, choice about what you want, not what drives you, was annoyingly accurate.
Exactly. Blame gets lazy. Biology gets the last word unless society changes incentives.
The UK sodium reduction story shows government can nudge industry without asking consumers to become nutrition PhDs.
I'll believe sugar regulation when I see it, but the mechanism is at least coherent.
And the Kuwait dairy metabolic matrix is a tangible translation. Protect liver, feed gut, support brain.
I like that because it avoids purity tests while still being specific about organs and functions.
Plus, it turns macro obsession into system management, which is way more sustainable.
So if we end on one theme, no magic trick beats insulin, leptin, microbes, and stress load.
The system wins. Your job is stacking inputs that make the system behave.
Thanks for riding with us through this glucose expert debate.
And for this series, take care of your brain, your gut, and your standards.
All right, relaxed outro time. Go drink water, eat fiber, and stop bargaining with biology.